All right, still got a minute, but anybody have any questions from last time? Okay. Yeah, my wife called and said that the reason we didn't get our mail on Saturday was because somebody came in to the post office and they had COVID-19, so they had to deal with that. So it is floating around there. So just again, the expected value, again, there's all sorts of uncertainty in all this, right? And so when you look at the what's called, the economists call expected value, you have to look at, okay, what's the probability that something happens times the benefit from it. And if the probability is, if the probability of it being useful is low, but the gain is high, if it turns out to be correct, then the expected value might be high, even though the probability that it does anything is low. So who knows what the probability is, but nonetheless, that's why we still have the rule, although not if I'm lecturing and have to take it off. But other than that, just again, like I said, my wife just called to let me know that. But all right.
Campus post office or the Hillsdale?
That was the Hillsdale post office, the regular Hillsdale post office. Yeah. Do we have a college post office?
Well, I just know that there are different, like, there's one like in Moss.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I just was curious whether it was like in campus or.
No, it was downtown. So, all right. Just a couple of things. One is I forgot to mention that the person that ends up with the highest total points in class wins this coveted ninja sword. We've, every semester I give out a ninja sword to the highest score. So you can have 200 points total. So even if you have a 93% or 94% going into the final and you're thinking, well, I'm in pretty good shape, you may want to just study really hard to make sure that you're the one that gets the ninja sword. In fact, I've got a couple people coming in today to pick up the ninja swords from last semester. Professor Clark won 2 ninja swords when he was a student here. There's only a few people that have ever won 2 ninja swords, which is maybe why we ended up hiring him as a professor. So anyway, just wanted to show this to you and get you motivated. The other thing is, Monday I normally do a band pick of the week, and Fridays I do classic album of the week. But band pick of the week is Steep Canyon Rangers. Anybody heard of Steep Canyon Rangers? One? Okay. I had one in my law and econ class. Yeah. You ought to take a listen to them. Again, you can get on Spotify or Pandora or whatever. But they won the 2013. They won a Grammy as the best bluegrass album of the year. And in fact, they played on this album is Steve Martin, the comedian. Turns out Steve Martin has won Grammys for his banjo playing. I don't know if anybody know that Steve Martin was a big banjo player? No? Okay, all right. Yeah. So anyway, you might want to take a listen to Steep Canyon Rangers, and they're interesting. All right. So last time we closed, we were saying that what we're trying to do is develop an economic theory about how people behave within and what the rules of the law are supposed to look like. We're going to read Bastiat's The Law. We're going to read Mises's Liberalism and Hayek's Constitutional Liberty, and they're going to talk a little bit about what the political structure ought to look like once we understand how market systems work. And we assume that people are that we're going to look at individual behavior. We're not trying to say that women do this, left-handed people do that, whatever. We're talking about individuals. And so we're saying individual behavior. And what we said that individuals, we said that they're rational, and we said they're self-interested. And what are they trying to do? We said they're trying to act to make themselves better off. And if again, we'll read Mises' liberalism, but Mises in 1948, I believe, he wrote a big book called Human Action. And that's why it's called Human Action, because he lays out his analysis that we're going to be talking about a little more, but it lays out his analysis that what happens is people are acting, and can we predict how they're going to act, and if we make the rules of the game this, how they'll, will they act differently, etc. So we said that, so what are we saying? That when you go out and I observe you doing something, I believe that you are trying to make yourself better off. Now again, you might get it wrong. We used the example of going on a blind date and it turns out that it's not working out. But nonetheless, you're trying to act to make yourself better off. Yeah?
Does make better off, is that more like in the eyes of the individual making themselves, like for instance, not necessarily forwarding their objective betterment, but more making themselves feel good?
Yes, he was saying that it's not that they're better off in some theological sense. It's better off in that you just think you personally trying to make yourself better off. Now, we said, what is that? You're self-interested. Okay? And that's what we mean by self-interested. You're trying to make yourself better off. But it doesn't mean selfish. Right? Well, economic analysis, assuming that you are rational, self-interested, all that means is when I observe you doing something, I don't think you're doing it randomly. I think that you're doing it because you believe you're trying to make yourself better off. So if I make the law a certain way, okay, then I'm going to affect what your behavior is. Right? I'm going to affect an outcome, and I ought to be able to predict that. Or if prices change, I should be able to figure out, okay, if prices change, what do I think people are going to do? Right? If the price of apples goes up, will that affect how many oranges you buy? Right? So I should, in order to reason that out, in order to think through how that's going to work, I got to figure that you guys are just going to act in a consistent manner. Now, again, you might not get it right, you might make mistakes, or how many of you have ever heard of Mother Teresa? All right, okay. Mother Teresa, she lived very, very poorly, right? She did not, and Mother Teresa probably could have charged $500 a piece to listen to her talk at Madison Square Garden, right? She didn't do that. Why? Because she felt she was better off by taking care of the poor. That made her feel better off. Lots of people give money to, donate, right? My wife and I donate to, different things. And when we're giving up our money, and we feel that we're better off by giving up our money to aid other people, right? Domestic Harmony is one of the local charities that we give to. And why do we do that? We're doing it because we feel better off by doing it. Okay? So don't think that what we're saying is that we assume that people are selfish. Sometimes you sort of get the idea that people who believe that in a market theory that somehow you think that everybody's selfish and that you're just going to try to accumulate as much stuff as you want, right? Accumulating stuff may not make you feel happy, right? May not. You may feel better by doing things where you just donate your time rather than going to work. Let's say there's a family of two, a wife and a husband, and maybe the husband decides to, the wife is going to be a doctor and do that, and the husband is just going to go out and donate his time to, different charities. Okay? Yeah.
How do economists economists classify the difference between self-interest and selfishness?
Well, self-interested is, the question is, what's the difference between self-interest and selfish? Selfish being that you just want to accumulate stuff, right? That you're going to do something and I'm going to be, well, you know, when people are selfish, right? They're not considering what other people want. Self-interested doesn't mean that. Self-interested could mean you want to take care of all you know, other people. All we're saying is that, well, all I'm saying is that when I say you're self-interested, I just mean that when I'm predicting what you're going to do, I'm presuming that you are acting rationally in the sense that you feel, why did my wife and I give money to domestic harmony? Okay, we gave money to domestic harmony because it must have made us feel better, right? We must have been, we're self-interested in that we felt happier by giving the money to domestic harmony than we did by, you know, buying some goofy, there's so much goofy things you can buy. You know, I'll buy the latest iPhone instead of the one that's 2 years old because, you know, the latest one's got all this other cool stuff, right? So that, just making that point, that, you know, selfishness, we're not assuming that people are selfish. We're assuming that they may give all their stuff away. But when they do, we're just assuming, why did they do that? They didn't do it because somebody put a gun to their head and said, you're giving all yourself away, right? The reason they did it is because they must have felt they were better off. Yeah.
So self-interested is just you see a reason for doing what you're doing.
Correct. Self-interest. Yeah. We want to have a logical explanation about how people work. And self-interested just says we observe somebody doing something, we're assuming that the reason they're doing it is they must have thought they were better off by doing that. Yeah.
If someone did put a gun to their head, would that still be an instance of self-interest because they thought they were better off alive than dead?
If someone puts a gun to your head, then whatever you did would not be happening because you're self-interested, right? You're doing it. Maybe the other person thinks it. Notice that we do that, though, in a sense. That is, what's taxation about, right? I mean, you have to pay your taxes, whether you want to pay them or not. And we may have a reason that we want to have people pay taxes. Because, for example, we may want to have and we'll talk more about this when we read Bastiat's The Law, but we might want to have rules against stealing, okay? And so, that's why we might think about that. All right. That leads us to this idea of the role of government, and that leads us to a point of, does the state exist for the individual, or does the individual exist for the state? All right? That is, are we here to make the government better, or why did we form government in the first place? Right? Did we form a government in order to make ourselves better off? Is the state there in order to make individuals better off, or are individuals there in order to make the state better? Okay? And that will have an effect, you know, what you think about that will have an effect on what you think the role of government's going to look like, right? And we're going to talk much more about the role of government. Again, when we read Mises and Bastiat and The Law, Mises and Bastiat and then Hayek, one of the things we're going to be talking about is what is that role of government and what should the government look like? What should the form of government be? So just to give you some historical ideas on this. Thomas Hobbes, right? 1651. What book is Thomas Hobbes famous for? Yeah, Leviathan, right? What's he saying in Leviathan? He says, you know what? Without government, life is what? Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, right? Probably heard that expression. Life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Now, that means that if we don't have any government at all, what will happen? The strong will prey upon the weak, right? If you have no government, right? And that's this, famous, again, that's what his famous expression is. Maybe you can just write it down. It's solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So now the question is, it makes a point that we ought to have a government. Then the question is, how do you keep government from being coercive and government taken over and life being solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short because your government is become Leviathan?
Wouldn't that be John Stuart Mill's idea of a social contract, the idea that government exists to serve the desires and needs of the people?
Yes, John Stuart Mill talks about what, you want to have a social contract. And there's a whole discussion about social contract theory that you can take a look at. And John Locke and other folks in that area talking about, are there ways to make that happen? And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about. One of the things that Hayek's going to say is, what should the characteristics of a law be like such that it doesn't turn into Leviathan and allows us to have a government which accomplishes this problem of without government you have anarchy and you have the strong preying upon the weak, but what can we do to limit what our government's going to do? And again, that's what is the title of Hayek's book is The Constitution of Liberty, right? And so that gives you an indication, right? You're going to have a constitution as a mechanism to try to limit what your government do so you can expand the amount of liberty that's out there. Just as another point, John Kennedy, right, 1961, in his inaugural address. Anybody know what he said in his inaugural address that was sort of famous talking about this?
Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Yeah. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Okay? So think about that for a minute. Does that imply, right? This was his famous ask not declaration in his 61 inaugural address. If it's saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, is that an implication that you exist to make the country better off? Or did we form the country in order to make ourselves better off? Just a third component, just again, these are just examples of this analysis or thinking about things, is a movie called Ants, 1998. How many have seen the movie Ants? Okay, yeah, it's a really good movie. Yeah, make sure you take a look at the movie Ants one of these days. Well, anyway, Woody Allen is an ant that gets discharged from the anthill, and Sylvester Stallone is one of the other ants. But there's a whole discussion in here, and in the movie Ants, what's Woody Allen? He comes to the conclusion that the anthill exists for the ants. Right? That is the individual that's the important unit of account. And why did we form the anthill in the first place? We formed the anthill to make each of the ants better off. So that, what does that mean? It means the rules of the game about the anthill ought to reflect the fact that the anthill exists for the ants. And again, as we read through Mises and Bastiat and Hayek, what are we going to look at? We're going to look at what form of government is most consistent with individual liberty, and why would we want to have individual liberty? Again, the title of Hayek's book, Constitutional Liberty. Why would we want that? And so what your government's going to look like really depends on whether the government exists for you guys, or did we form government to make you better off? All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at the economic system and try to make sure that we understand how the market process works, how do markets work. But we're going to start out with a technique when we're trying to guess what people's behavior are going to be if this happens or if that happens. What we need to do is to develop what we're going to call marginal analysis. That is, we're going to say, okay, how do individuals make decisions, right? And we said that what do individuals do, right? They're out there trying to make themselves better off, right? So if that's what they're going to do, how are they going to behave? And what's important to take a note at is that that people make decisions what we call at the margin, about the next thing, right? When you decide to, when you go to the grocery store, you make a decision about to buy, well, are you going to buy one more box of cornflakes, right? Or are you going to buy one more apple, or one more pound of apples? We're looking at, you make the decision about the next thing. And so why would we do that? Well, that's what we're going to discuss about here. So what are we going to assume? We assume that you guys are trying to maximize, that you guys are trying to make yourself better off. If you take Econ 202, Principles of Micro, what you're going to talk about is that we're going to assume that people try to maximize utility or net benefit. And so again, when you start to take principles of microeconomics, we say a sort of a mathematical way or a more detailed way of saying people are out there trying to make themselves better off. Okay? What we're saying is they're trying to maximize utility. So what we're doing is we're assuming that you guys have a benefit from eating apples or buying another pound of grapes. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to try to maximize that net benefit that you're going to be doing. So if you're going to do that, we're going to say, how can we do that? We're going to assume that, sort of think logically, when deciding on the next unit, whether it's buying something or spending another hour watching Netflix, okay? What you're going to decide is, let's look at, do I add more to my total benefit than total cost, right? If I'm adding more to my total benefit, to my total cost, then my net benefit must be going up. So what are we trying to do? You're trying to maximize total benefit minus total cost. Okay? So if I'm trying to maximize the difference between benefit and cost, I'm trying to maximize that net benefit, it just logically makes sense to say, okay, when I spend the next hour, or am I adding more to my benefit than I'm adding to my cost? Okay? Now, when we're drawing demand curves and we're talking about goods themselves, we're usually talking about the added cost to you is the price you got to pay. So if you're going to buy one more pound of grapes, right, and grapes are $3 a pound, then what's the added cost of the next pound of grapes? It's going to be $3, right? It may be that you're looking at time, and we'll talk more about this when we go into supply curves, but what's called the opportunity cost. What else could you be doing with your time? Normally, when we draw a demand curve and supply curve for goods, which we're going to, it's going to be in price. But just conceptually, if you're going to spend another hour watching Netflix, you're going to say, what's the added benefit to me of watching that hour of Netflix, and what's the added cost to me, right? And you may go, okay, the added cost to me is I'm getting tired, right? And I'm going to feel worse off in an hour because I'm too tired. And so the added benefit to me of watching this goofy Netflix show is it's going to make me feel better off, but I'm going to feel the added benefit from that extra hour, okay, is not worth the added cost to me of that extra hour. So when we're drawing demand and supply curves, we focus mostly on price, but you can think about it more broadly than that. There's a cost. What does Milton Friedman say? There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So even if notice that if you, I don't know how they're doing when you go in to get lunch. I don't know how they're doing that, but they used to be normal circumstances. You'd go into the cafeteria, and what will happen is you'll stand in line for things, right? And it may be that you'd really rather have the hamburger over here as opposed to the pizza over there, but the line for the and the price is zero, right? The added cost to you is zero. You've already paid whatever you had to pay for your room and board, and so you've already paid for your meals. So the added cost of that hamburger versus the pizza, zero, but you got to stand in line for the hamburger, right? Because everybody likes the hamburger and nobody wants the pizza. You got to think, okay, what's the cost to me? It's the cost of my time. I'm standing, you walk in, there's a big line for the hamburger, and you just, okay, I'd rather have the hamburger, but I'm going to go over here. Why is that? Because the cost of your time is embedded in that, right? So the big picture is you do things as long as you add more to your benefit than you add to your cost. All right. So one of the assumptions that we make in order to make this thing work out is we assume, and this is a major assumption, we assume that the added benefit, or what we're going to call marginal benefit, right? It's at the margin, the next thing. The marginal benefit goes down as you get more of something. Right? As you get more of something. Okay? So that, at least after some point. So you go in, let's say you really like ice cream cones, right? And so you're down at Coney and Swirls downtown, and you get an ice cream cone, and that first ice cream cone, a lot of added benefit, right? You want a second one? Okay, eat the second ice cream cone. Doesn't give you quite as much benefit as the first one, okay? Now you've had 8 ice cream cones, and you're going to have the 9th one, right? The added benefit of that 9th ice cream cone is going to be pretty low. And it might be negative, right? You might throw up after 8 of them. And so what we're assuming is that at least after some point, the added benefit of the next one is going down. And that's generally true if you sort of think about nearly anything. The only exception I've ever found is shoes for my wife. My wife has boxes of shoes, and whenever we go somewhere, if there's a shoe store, she'll walk in and, oh, that's a cute shoe, and next thing I know, I find another pair of shoes. So, but that's the one exception I've ever found is this where we don't have diminishing marginal benefit. So, again, Rod Stewart had an album called Every Picture Tells a Story, don't it? Okay, maybe I'll bring that in as my classic album. How many have ever heard of Every Picture Tells a Story? Okay, yeah. You should all be raising your hand. But nonetheless, every picture tells a story, don't it? Well, that is a theme here in that if I'm drawing a graph, all it is a picture telling a story. So if you're analyzing, you're answering a question on the midterm, and let's say I have you draw demand and supply curves to do something, which is what we're working towards here. If I have you draw a demand and supply curve, you got to tell the story. Just drawing the curve ain't going to get you the full credit. Right? When you look at the old exams, and there's old exams, or if you look in the Wolfram folder, you'll see it has old exams there. If you can look there, and you'll notice that I'll always ask a question about demand and supply curves. And I'm going to say, use demand and supply curves to help you explain what's going to happen if there's a there's fires in California that burn down the trees, and we say what will happen to the price of lumber. Okay, so if you just draw the picture, you're only going to get like 5 out of 10. It's explaining what's happening, explaining that picture that I want you to be able to do. So if we were to draw a picture that says this, and I were to draw that, and I had units here, right, some quantity there, and I had total benefit, what would happen? I just told a story that said that the total benefit curve isn't going up as fast, right? I'm adding, what is the slope of this line, right? It's how much I add to total benefit as I increase Q, right? How much is total benefit going up when I increase Q? And so what I've just told you is that as you get more and more of the units, that total benefit curve is flattening out. In fact, it may go negative, right? You watch, I don't know if you've ever been and seen people drinking. It may be that, if you've ever at a frat party or something, which you don't have anymore, but you might have had in the past, you see somebody that's they've been drinking and then they're in the bathroom and they're throwing up, okay? Which tells you that the added benefit of that last beer was negative, right? Their total benefit is now lower than it was before they drank that beer. So it's possible the thing could turn down, but what does that just say? It says as we get more of something, this thing's flattening out, which tells you that what's really happening to the slope is getting flatter, smaller, right? The number as Q goes up. So what is that saying? When I say that marginal benefits decline, it's saying that the total benefit is getting flatter, is getting less as you add more units, right? So again, if you've had any mathematics, what's going on here, right? The first derivative, which is the slope, is getting smaller as you move along that way. So if I were to draw the marginal benefit, and I had Q, it's going to look like that, right? It's going to say the marginal benefit is going down as Q goes up. And what are we going to shoot for? This is going to be the demand curve, okay? That's what we're doing here, is we're giving you the explanation about why when I draw a demand curve, does it slope down. We're going to do the same thing in a moment about costs. The marginal cost goes up, and what's the marginal cost curve? It's going to be the supply curve. So why we're doing the marginal analysis is to give you an explanation about why you expect demand curves to be sloping down and supply curves to be sloping up. So the marginal benefit is going down as we move along the move along its Q. So well, we're also going to let's just give you an example. What are you doing at the margin? You're taking the derivative, or if you just sort of think about it, it's the total benefit of this unit minus the total benefit at the unit before, right? And you don't often get to buy 6.37 units of something, right? You either get to buy 6 units or 7 units, right? So you may not have, when you do analysis in Econ 202, or even here, we're going to draw demand curves continuous, right? Just because it's easier to do it that way. But it may be that in real life, it's the amount of this unit minus the amount of the other unit, and it's not continuous. If you can write, when you get to 202, you might write an equation, certainly in 303, write an equation for the demand curve. What does the demand look like at different Qs? And that will give you a continuous, and normally you write that as a continuous function. But the big point is my added benefits are going down as Q goes up. Yeah?
Can you explain the distinction a little bit more about between marginal benefit and total benefit?
And what?
Total benefit and marginal benefit?
Yeah, total benefit, in fact, total benefit and marginal benefit. What is marginal benefit?
Did you have to factor in the cost when it comes to marginal?
Well, no, not right now. We're not dealing with the cost. We're just looking at benefit. What is it? It's the total benefit. It's the marginal benefit of the nth unit. What is that? That's total benefit at the nth unit minus the total benefit at the n minus 1 units. So how much did I add to my total benefit when I got the next thing? So let me just give you a little example of that. That is, if I put total benefit here, and I already have one out here, and I put marginal benefit here, and I put quantity here. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have total benefit as 10, 18, 24, and 29. Now notice I didn't just randomly put these total benefit numbers in there, right? I put them in there so that I have marginal benefits going down, right? So what's the marginal benefit? And we're going to assume that when Q equals 0, when it's 0, then total benefit 0, right? So if we look at the total benefit of the first unit is 10, you started out with 0, so the added benefit had to be 10 minus 0, which is 10. If we look at what's the marginal benefit of the second one, it's going to be 18 minus 10, which is equal to 8. Okay? If I look at the third one, then the total benefit's 24, but the total benefit at 2 was 18, which is going to be 6. And then finally, 29 minus 24 is equal to 5.
So the marginal benefit is just the change of total benefit between units?
That's correct. The marginal benefit is the change, right? It's the change in total benefit as you get one more unit. Okay? And so like I said, I didn't just draw this randomly, right? I had to make it so that the way the total benefit thing went up, it went up by a smaller unit each time, okay? So total benefit at this unit minus total benefit at the one before is the marginal benefit. If I were to have a continuous function, then it would just be the slope, right? But if you don't have something continuous, then you just do it by taking the total benefit at the one unit minus the total benefit at the other. Again, if you look at the old exams, you'll see I'll always give you a question where I'll give you a total benefit table, and you have to generate what the marginal benefit is. Or I might give you, in a second, we'll talk about total cost, but total cost is a very similar feature, right? If I were to look at total cost at the, well, let's just put it this way. Marginal cost is what? It's the total cost at the nth unit minus the total cost at the n minus 1 unit. Right? So what is just it? It's the same thing. It's the change in total cost as you get more. Okay? And if it were continuous, what would we have? If we're continuous, we've got a continuous function, we're going to put total cost here and put Q here. What we're going to assume about costs is that the marginal cost, right, which is the addition to total cost as you move along, that marginal cost increases as Q gets bigger, right? So we assumed that marginal benefit goes down as you get more, right? And we're going to assume that marginal costs go up as you get more. So if we were to draw that picture, we would have a total cost curve that would look something like this, right? That is, total costs are getting steeper as we move along here. The slope of the total cost curve is the marginal cost, right? So just as the slope of the total benefit curve is marginal benefit, the slope of total cost is marginal cost. So again, if I had the cost when you take Econ 202, you're going to have a cost function, right? And it'll be a function of Q. And what will happen? If you take the first derivative of the total cost function, then that's going to be marginal cost if you didn't had any calculus. If you end up majoring in economics, you've got to take at least one semester of calculus. But if you've had any calculus, you know that the marginal benefit is the first derivative of the total benefit. The marginal cost is the first derivative of the total cost function. Marginal anything is the change in the next unit, and if it's continuous, then it's going to be the slope or the first derivative. Whether we talk about margin utility or marginal income or whatever we're going to talk about, at the margin it's going to be the change. So if we look at that and we were to draw a picture of what the marginal cost curve looks like, we're going to put this Q here, marginal cost goes like this. What's going to happen? That marginal cost curve is going to look like that. And we could put this up here. We could put this in dollars, or we could put it in time, or whatever. Okay? The marginal cost, we assume that the marginal cost is increasing. And what's this thing going to end up being? Why we're going through all this analysis about the margin is that's going to be what the supply curve looks like. Right? The supply curve is going to be the marginal cost curve, and the demand curve is going to be the marginal benefit curve. And what are we going to do? We're going to have a demand curve which is downward sloping, and we're going to have a supply curve which is upward sloping. And so that's going to work out. We don't have quite enough time to do this piece, but I'm going to introduce it to you. Okay? So let's say, just to make sure that you understand this concept. Okay? Suppose we have the following. Peter and Audrey are boyfriend and girlfriend. Okay? And then what happens is Audrey sees Peter out on a date with Claire. And so what happens is Audrey says, I know you like Claire better than you like me because I saw you on a date with her. And what would Peter say? Peter would say, haven't you had Econ 105? You can't possibly be right. Okay? And why would that be? Let's just think about this for a minute. Let's look at number of dates. Okay? And Peter's got 4 times that he can go out during the week. It's got 4 dates to allocate. And now we're going to put total benefit of Audrey, and we're going to have total benefit of Claire. Okay? And let me just give you some points here. He's got, with Audrey, it's 15, 25, 33, and 39. Okay? And total benefits with Claire, 1 date has got 7, and 2 dates has 10, 3 dates has 12, and 4 dates has 13. Okay? Pretty clear that he likes Audrey better than Claire, right? But he's got 4 dates to allocate. Okay? What's the marginal benefit of the first date with Audrey? Yeah, 15. What's the marginal benefit of the second date? 3rd date? 4th date? Marginal benefit of first date with Claire? 2nd? 2, 1. Okay? I'm going to allocate my 4. I'm Peter. I'm going to go out 4 times. That's right. So these are the marginal benefits here. First date. What do you go with? Yeah, 15. Second date. 3rd date. 4th date. Claire, right? The marginal benefit of that 4th date with Claire is 7, and the marginal benefit of that 4th date with Audrey is 6. So Peter now puts this table up, explains to Audrey, hey, you got it all wrong. I clearly like you better than I do Claire. It's just that the marginal benefit of that first date with Claire is larger than the marginal benefit of the 4th date with you during the week. Okay? Now, what if you were Audrey and you wanted Peter just to go out with you, what would you say? You don't want him to make decisions at the margin, do you? You want to say, guess what? You either get 4 dates with me or you get 4 dates with Claire. If I see you out with somebody else, then you can't go out with me, right? Why would you do that? Because now you're forcing Peter to make the decision at the total as opposed to the margin. And that has been what females have said. I've heard that before, that they say, you know what, we're going steady, right? Well, what does going steady mean? It means you're supposed to just go out with me, right? And so why would that be? Why would that ever come up as a solution? It comes up as a solution because they understand marginal benefit and the fact that marginal benefit declines as you get more of a unit. So that's why Peter, would use Econ 105 to explain that social phenomena. All right. So for next time, we've actually almost finished this idea of marginal analysis. So we'll be looking at demand, and also you can look at elasticity. Now, again, elasticity is a concept that it'll take some thinking through to get. So don't be disturbed if you don't quite get it. But by the end of Wednesday, you'll understand elasticity. Yeah.
Would it be wise to start reading any of the books other than Capitalist Manifesto at this point?
I would still keep with the Capitalist Manifesto right now. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it'll be a while before we get to Bastiat's law.
Okay, that's good. And we're
Right.
still in chapter 3,
Yeah,
right?
just go ahead and keep following that.